What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Concrete Edge right here on Deco-Crete TV. My name's Jeff, and on today's show, we're going to be going over some of the differences between powder and liquid release, as well as the benefits and downsides of each one, so stay tuned and you're going to learn all about it. So if you're planning on stamping some concrete, honestly, it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, or what kind of stamps you might be using, you're gonna need some kind of release agent. Without it, the concrete is just gonna stick to the stamps and the texture is gonna be sloppy at best if you even get any at all. Honestly, it's just gonna be a disaster. So the old go-to for this is antique powder release, but in the last 10 to 15 years, clear liquid release has become a lot more popular. Now, although there is no real right or wrong to this, it is important to understand the pros and cons of each one so you can make the best decision possible for your own unique situation. So first up is powder release, and anybody who's ever stamped concrete has probably used powder at some point. Now here at Deco-Crete, we firmly believe that powder release, along with color hardener, creates the most realistic, highest end stamped concrete on the planet. Now, I know there might be some of you out there that disagree with that statement, and that's okay. It's just our opinion, and you're certainly entitled to yours. Now, there are a lot of upsides to powder release, but most of them lead back to creating a more natural, realistic look. So once you cast that release out on the slab, it really creates more of a barrier there than liquid release does. And that barrier is just going to lead to crisper impressions because it's almost like the stamp never really touches the concrete. And you're not going to get as much grain or fuzz in the texture, and you're also going to notice that the surface just pulls up a lot less when you're stamping. It really just releases better. Now, powder release also adds an antiquing effect to stamped concrete all on its own without any kind of antiquing product. Right after you get done stamping, all you're gonna see is that release color until you come back and wash it off. And if done correctly, just the right amount of color stays behind, creating a way more natural look than adding liquid antiquing later. Another benefit to powder release is that it seems to work well in pretty much all weather conditions just because of that hydrophobic properties that it has. Now, if it's a cool, overcast day and the surface is a little bit sloppy, it just seems to work a lot better than liquid. Now, you can even spread powder release out on the surrounding slabs to protect them from concrete splatter or color hardener, and then the next day when you come back to a power wash, it's all going to clean up really easy. Now, that hydrophobic nature of powder release, it also helps hold moisture in the slab, kind of like a curing agent, so you don't have to worry about losing too much moisture too fast on hot days. So, of course, there are some downsides to powder release, and really the biggest one is that it's messy. And by messy, I mean it will get all over the place, all over you. Anyone who's out on that slab stamping is gonna look like a coal miner after the job's over. Now, the nice thing is that powder release does wash off pretty easily with soap and water, so it's never really been that big of a deal to us. But if you're not willing to get that dirty, then powder release probably isn't for you. For that matter, then decorative concrete might not be the best career choice. Now, also, spraying your customer's house down with soapy water the day before the job will just help the walls clean off easily, so please check out this Technique of the Week video right here for a full tutorial. Now, the next downside is washing, and again, we never thought this was that big of a deal because we always had a pressure washer on site, but it will take you a lot longer than just cleaning up the sawdust after you're done cutting. But the cool thing is, after that's all done, the antiquing's also done, and the time spent washing is about the same amount of time as you'd spend adding texture enhancer later, so I guess you could say it's a wash. Now, the one thing that powder release could do to lead to problems down the road is not removing enough during the washing. It's honestly really the biggest problem that we've seen over the years, and it not only can cause sealer delamination later, but just leaving too much powder behind it doesn't really look very good either. Now, good washing techniques can easily overcome this downside, so please check out this video right here and we'll take you through washing step by step. So, a few tips for using powder release are: make sure you cast it with a Tampico style brush and don't try to throw it by hand. Now, this is also going to help you with tip number 2, which is use the right amount. So remember that barrier I was talking about earlier? Well, if it gets too thick, it can actually block out some of the texture from the stamps, so just make sure you use the right amount. So you can also use a small roller to fix pull-up. Even though powder release works better than liquid on cutting down on pull-ups, it will still happen at times, and all you need is just take this little roller and roll over those spots. Now lastly, when it comes to powder release, just make sure you use the right equipment. I mean, a 3500 PSI power washer and a buffer machine are just must-have tools for any stamped concrete project. I mean, really, it doesn't matter what kind of release you use. Now, we do have full videos on these tips as well as a few others, so please check out our powder release playlist on our YouTube channel. So now, on to liquid release, and man, when I first started stamping concrete, liquid release was kind of a newer thing. I mean, everybody was used to powder, and there weren't really very many antiquing products out there that could really recreate the look of powder release. Things started to change fast, however, and nowadays liquid release is pretty widely used. Now, just because we like powder better, we certainly do understand that the products and the skill level of installers have come a long way, and it is a viable option. The main upside of liquid release is just that it's cleaner. I mean, integral color and liquid release might not create the highest end outcome, but they do make stamped concrete a lot less dirty. So if that's important to you, then I guess you're gonna have to make a choice between better impressions or a cleaner work environment. Now, liquid release also lets you see the texture better while stamping, and after you get used to powder, you're gonna know what to look for, but in the beginning, I do understand why people say that they can see what they're doing better with liquid. Now, another pro to liquid release is less wash time. I mean, you are still gonna have to wash down your sawdust, but you won't need to spend near as much time power washing as you would with powder. Now, if you're stamping an interior job, I mean, liquid release is really just the only good option, and I also prefer liquid release if you're stamping borders, on broom jobs, or for any kind of vertical concrete. So now on to some cons, and I do want to say here that I understand that liquid release does work in most situations. We're just saying that it's not the best that stamped concrete can be. Now, a lot of that's just going to come down to the impressions. I mean, liquid release just doesn't create that same barrier that powder does, and the surface just has to be at just the right point to get a nice crisp impression without any graininess or fuzz. Now, it's basically just not as forgiving, and on most days, that perfect point just never happens, or even if it does, it only lasts for part of the job, and this leads to sloppier textures and a lot of pull-up. Now, some of this can be fixed up later, and a lot of people might not even notice the difference, but it is something you're gonna have to address at some point. So even though you're gonna save some time during power washing, now you're gonna have to make an antiquing to make it all look right. Products like Texture Enhancer work really well for this because they're designed for this exact thing. What's not made for this, on the other hand, is just trying to mix powder release into your liquid and using that as an antiquing. I mean, this is just asking for trouble down the road, and it's not really gonna look that good either. Real antiquing products are made to bond to the concrete, not act as a release agent. And they're also going to give you the most realistic look possible if you stamp with liquid release. All in all, antiquing is just something else that you're going to have to buy and spend time applying, all in an effort to make it look like you use powder release. And I'm just telling you, if you see enough of both of them, you can tell the difference. Now, liquid release won't aid in curing on when it's hot out, but those dry, sunny days do seem to be when it works the best. I mean, I've personally been really frustrated with liquid release on cool, overcast days. I mean, it just keeps pulling up on the stamps, and if you don't clean them off as you go, it just keeps getting worse and worse. Now, I will say that I don't have nearly as much experience with liquid as I do with powder, and I'm sure if I used it all the time, it would probably get a lot easier. But then I'd have to use liquid release all the time, and who wants to do that? A few things that we've learned about liquid release are, first of all, just use a decent sprayer. I mean, you never know how windy it's going to be on the job, and those little plastic sprayers, they're just going to be too slow anyways. I would recommend something more heavy duty with more volume like this one here from Chapin. Now, second, if it's not working right, try spraying different amounts on the surface. I mean, it really just depends on the day. Sometimes you need more, sometimes you need less. And when it's just pulling up all over the place, people just tend to think that they need to put more on. And I mean, that does seem like common sense. And if it fixes the problem, then great. But if it's not helping or maybe even making things worse, then try something different, which means a little bit less. Now, always have plenty of rags on the job. I mean, even on the best days, in my experience, you're still going to get some pull up. And this is not going to work like powder release where you can just rub some release on there with your brush. The only way to fix it is to clean it off completely, and you're going to need rags. Now, you can also use a floor buffer and a scrub machine to knock down some of the fuzz. I mean, you're not going to need to do this on every job, but if you have a grainy looking texture, this will help things out. Now, the last tip for using liquid release is that sometimes you got to switch things up, and switching to powder on those cool, damp days is just going to be big. I mean, I've seen a lot of contractors over the years that use liquid release in the summertime. They turn out awesome work, but then when the weather gets cooler, they're going to move to powder. Now, like I said in the beginning, there's no right or wrong to this topic, and you should really just use whatever's working best for you. There's always going to be some debate between contractors on which one looks better, and I gotta say that I do agree with the old school guys on this one. That being said, liquid release definitely does have its place, and my best advice is just not to take an all or nothing approach to this, and learn how to utilize both of them so whenever the situation calls for it, you're ready to go. Well guys, that's pretty much it for today's show. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Man, we really appreciate all the support that you guys show to the channel by tuning in every week and hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Please leave us a comment if we missed anything or if you have any questions on liquid or powder release for stamped concrete. Now, if you're already subscribed, don't forget about that bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and it really helps our channel out. So, from all of us here at Deco-Crete TV, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.